Hi, I'm Mariko Gifford with Moringa for Life, and today I'm going to be showing a worm farm. So this is called Can of Worms. I've been using this system for many years. It's a really good system, really compact, but you can also make a worm bin at home as well. You just need to have it be able to drain away and capture the liquid and have a lid. So there's many examples online where you can look and see in a really simple way how to make a worm bin. I started this worm bin with about a pound of worms, and you can also get them just in your yard and just cultivating them, and you could also get them online. There's a website, Big Jim's Worm Farm, and he ships it all over the country. Really good quality, lots of good worms. So this is the can of worms. It has air holes at the top. This is a lid, and there's these layers. We're going to open this up and I'll show you the layers. And then this is actually holding liquid because this will drain through. And then there's a spigot, and when you're ready to cultivate some of the liquid, you just open that spigot and fill your bucket or your pail. So we're going to open this up and show you the can of worms. Alright, so we're going to open this up and show you how this works. This is a lid. You see it has these air holes, and the different levels, this already has a little bit in it that we started, but all of these trays have holes. And once the worms come, we fill this with food, then the worms work their way up through there into this layer. And that's how it is, it's stackable. So this comes off. Then this is actually a full layer that we have filled with food. And I cover this with damp towels. You want to keep the moisture level in a worm bin pretty high because they can't dry out. And you can see now this is what they really like. This is from juicing, making carrot juice. They love melon and squash, and so we lay that, and they will eventually eat that. And they're not eating the food. You just have to make sure that you realize that worms are omnivores, and what they're mostly looking for is the microbiology, the microorganisms that come to break this down, to eat this. They eat those microorganisms. They do not eat the food. So a lot of people think that you're feeding the worms, but actually the worms are eating the microorganisms. So the smaller, the more surface area there is for those microorganisms to get in and eat that, the faster this will work down. You can see there's some tortillas. This is going to take a while. But we just put what we discard from the kitchen. So you can see that this, if I lift this, you'll see these areas of the worms that, let me see where, they've gone down because I already had opened this. But you see they're in the midst of this food, eating the microorganisms in there. Right? And if I kept digging, you'd see more and more. This will go down pretty fast because it's so fine. Normally, if we have big food in here, you would see, a whole different story there. But you can see under there, all of that is getting worked down. So that's a layer, and we fill a layer, and then I cover it with these towels. Now the towels, you don't want to put your good towels down. They'll eventually eat the towels as well. So I have selected towels that I use that I no longer use in my kitchen. So I'm going to take this layer off and show you. And you got to look at it quickly because they're going to go down. But you can see this was a previous layer that looked like that one. And it's the remains of what is there. So this is a lot of worms in there, really going after what's left in here. And all surrounding them are worm castings. So all of this brown matter that looks like very damp soil, that's all worm castings. Right here is a nice example. It's really smooth at the top. And you want to really be gentle with the worms. They're doing a good service there, right? Anytime you put something in that still had any tag is going to still be in there. But you want to be gentle. I'm disturbing their habitat just to show you this. But if we left this open for any period of time, within 5 minutes, all of these worms that are visible to you now will disappear. They dive down because they want to avoid the dry air and the light. They want to go down into the soil, into this habitat. So we use the worm castings, and we also use the water from it. So I'm going to pour some water through here. Now it's really important to understand that your water source cannot be something that is harmful for microorganisms. And city water kills microorganisms. It has chlorine and chloramine. So I have water, whenever I'm going to work with my worm bin, I put a bucket of water for 24 hours and all of that will dissipate out of there. And so this is the water that I'll use, not the water out of a faucet, right? Now, when I put this water through, it's going to just sieve through, and now you saw that there were holes in that tray, right? So this is one way to very easily take the nutrients, and this is all what's going to come through with water. These are the nutrients that you can then use. It's bioavailable right now from the worm castings. The worms do an amazing, miraculous thing when they put that food through their gut. It transforms it into this magic black gold. And that is pure nutrition, pure food for you, the roots of your plants. So at Moringa for Life, we're using worm castings when we plant a seed, and we're using worm castings when we transplant a root, and also when we make cuttings. And as the tree grows, we're feeding that, because so many people want to know what fertilizer to give, and this is what we do. Now, we've done these small bins, and I've also had large quantities where it was 6 feet by 8 feet, by 4 feet high. That's where you're really doing some major worm production, and you can get even bigger than that. So this is an at-home one, very simple, that you can do. Anybody can do. Kids can get into it because they really are interested in the worms. But you can see there's barely any worms visible now. They've already gone down into the soil. All right, so this is the spigot at the bottom. We let some water filter through there, and I opened the spigot, and if you can see, that's just black gold coming out. The water that is filtered through that layer. And we just put a little bit through. But you can see that water there is just full of nutrition for your plants. Now I take this, and I don't just use it this strength. I will dilute this 50% water so it spreads further. And when you give it to your plants, you want to clear the area around the base of the root of your moringa tree and water it around that. For the moringa tree, it's a taproot, so you can do like within a foot diameter of your root, of your stalk. If you use this for branching roots, it would need to be wider, and if you use it for trees, you want to go out to the outer edge, so the edge of the canopy of that tree, that's the edge on the ground that you want to be working with. And if you have mulch, which you should have mulch, you want to pull that mulch away and get to the soil level, and then remulch that, and then water. Water to take those nutrients down into the soil, into the root of your plant. Alright, so once you have your worm castings, a really, really good thing to do is to make worm casting tea. And we actually call it a tea because it's going to be brewed. We're going to we're going to aerate it. So what I do, now that we've let this settle a little bit, the worms have gone down. So it's one way to be able to harvest the top layer of your worm bin and avoid getting worms into your little collection of worm castings. So I still go through and I'll take any ones out that are still in there, but I've let a good amount of time, enough time go by that they've dove down, they're down into the bottom of this layer. So we won't sacrifice any worms there. Each worm is dear to us, so we want to make sure that they have a very long, good life in our worm bin that we're providing. So you can see it's pretty much, well, there are a few, like I'm just going to make sure that we don't have any stowaways here. You'll see some light material in here that's some egg shell got in here. It is not ideal, but it was a necessity at the time. We just threw eggshells in here. So important to know that the ingredients is anything that's plant-based. That's what you feed here. No animal product. No beef, no meat, no dairy, no cheese, no eggs, egg shells because of the calcium of it. But normally I will make this, break that down into a powder and put it in. But this particular time we were moving, and so everything went in there so we could travel with it. So that's about the amount that we're going to do for a 5-gallon bucket. And again, it's water that has been able to sit for 24 hours or more so that the chlorine and chloramine can dissipate. And we're also going to use the liquid that we got from down there. Now what I have here, it's a little bit big for this, but it can be used. You can use other things like cut down an old pillowcase, something that has some kind of a mesh feeling to it, even fabric. So for a 5-gallon, it's less than about a pound or less, and then it's in the bottom of that, and I'm going to lower that into there. Now there's two things that we're going to do. We're going to aerate inside the bag, and we're going to also aerate outside of the bag. So this is a very simple aquarium pump which you can get online many places, and just make sure that there's 2 places for that air to come out, because we want to, one end of this has 2 small air stones like this. So these are little couplers, a T coupler, so that I can put 2 air stones in there. Those go in the bag. So now we're adding air to this. And what that does, it's going to wake up the microorganisms that are dormant in there by giving them air. Then these larger stones, same thing. Here's a coupler, a T coupler, and these 2 larger air stones are going to go into the bucket. So those are the two things going on here. Now with this, I can snap this. This is actually, we use this same one for a 55-gallon drum that we use for compost tea. You can close that up and then just submerge that. We're going to take the water that we just drained off of there, because we know that's already really full of really good nutrients, and we're going to add that back in. And we're going to let this brew for 24 hours or more. The minimum is 24 hours. Okay? Really important that you make sure that your pump is higher than your water, because it'll siphon back in. All right, so this is plugged in now. Maybe you can hear a little hum. It's bubbling, and this will brew now for 24 hours, and then we'll take this liquid. What's happened is the worm casings, which are the worm castings, are in a little case of mucus. It comes out that way, and it's kind of like a time capsule. So if you put worm castings directly into the soil, it takes a little bit of time for that outside casing to break down. But when we brew it, we're breaking that down in the brewing process, right, in that movement of it. So now the nutrients that are inside that little capsule are released into the water. Then we'll take this water and we will dilute it 50%. We'll take water that we set overnight, 24 hours or more, and we'll mix that with 50% of that water. So there's microorganisms now in here living, and we might want to make sure that you don't put city water in there and kill the whole deal. So make sure that you are paying really good attention to your water source. Once this is brewed, you have this nutrient-dense food. You want to make sure that you distribute that to your plants right away. So the microorganisms that are in there are aerobic. Even though they're in water, every microorganism itself is encased in a little bubble. So it has air in there, and we're aerating this, right? We're giving it air. Well, as soon as we turn this off, it no longer is getting that extra oxygen, that extra air it needs to live. So if you set this for even an hour, 2 hours, somewhere in that time frame, those microorganisms that you've just taken all that time to cultivate will die. So once you finish brewing this, you turn it off and you use it. Now, if you can't turn it off in 24 hours or you can't use it, you can do it for another 10 to 12 hours and keep aerating that. After that, they really need to get into a food source because there's no food in there. There's air to live, but there's no food. So if you aren't prepared in 24 hours, so there's some timing involved of when to start your worm tea, so that you make sure your calendar is clear and you have a way that you're going to be able to distribute that, because you cannot save that for another day. Make sure that you use it right within that hour is the optimal of turning that air off. So this is the fertilizer that we use, and we use also compost tea that we make with compost. But this is something that most everybody can do in a small scale. You can do it even smaller than this, and there's other varieties of these worm bins that have been developed over the years. But it's a really great way to make your own fertilizer. You use good organic food that you're eating, and feed that with all plant-based. You're going to have a really rich, very nutrient-dense food for your moringa trees and for any plant that you give that to. So I just wanted to show that. It comes up a lot in questions that I field from my website and from my webinars, is what fertilizer to give. So I wanted to give a really good example of that. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned.